History is full of familiar faces, names etched into our collective memory. But what about the stories that were never told? The heroes hidden in the shadows, their monumental contributions erased from the pages of our textbooks. For every celebrated figure, there are countless others whose names have been lost to time, their achievements claimed by someone else, their legacies buried under layers of injustice and neglect. Today, we pull back the curtain on 5 of these unsung heroes, whose incredible stories deserve to be known. This is a journey to rewrite history and give credit where it's long overdue. Our first story begins in 1951 at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. A 31-year-old African-American mother named Henrietta Lacks was being treated for cervical cancer. Without her knowledge or consent, doctors took a sample of her cancerous cells. This was a common practice at the time. But what happened next was anything but common. In a nearby lab, scientists were astounded. Unlike any cells they had ever seen, Henrietta's cells didn't die. They doubled every 24 hours, creating an immortal line of human cells. They were codenamed HeLa. The HeLa cells became one of the most important tools in modern medicine. They were instrumental in developing the polio vaccine. They traveled to space to test the effects of zero gravity, and they were at the forefront of research into cancer, AIDS, gene mapping, and in vitro fertilization. An entire multi-billion-dollar medical industry was built on the foundation of Henrietta's cells. But while the world benefited, Henrietta's family was left in the dark and in poverty. They couldn't even afford the very health care that their mother's cells had helped to revolutionize. For decades, they had no idea that a part of Henrietta was still alive, being bought and sold in labs all over the globe. It wasn't until the 1970s that the family accidentally learned the truth, beginning a long and painful fight for recognition and justice. Finally, in recent years, institutions have begun to acknowledge their profound debt. Henrietta Lacks, once just a name on a simple gravestone, is now celebrated as the mother of modern medicine, a woman whose unwilling sacrifice changed the world. Just as Henrietta's story was unfolding, another scientific revolution was taking place across the Atlantic, at King's College London. There, a brilliant and meticulous scientist named Rosalind Franklin was pioneering the use of She was on the verge of one of the greatest discoveries in human history, the structure of DNA. In May 1952, she captured a stunningly clear image, which she labeled Photo 51. It was the smoking gun, an unmistakable X-shape that clearly revealed DNA's double helix structure. But Franklin never got the chance to publish her findings. A male colleague, Maurice Wilkins, secretly showed Photo 51-2. Competing scientists from Cambridge University, James Watson and Francis Crick, using Franklin's crucial data without her permission, they quickly built their famous model of the double helix and rushed to publish. In 1962, Watson, Crick, and Wilkins stood on stage in Stockholm to receive the Nobel Prize for discovering the secret of life. Rosalind Franklin was not there. She had died of cancer 4 years earlier, at just 37 years old. Her pivotal contribution almost completely erased from the narrative. Today, after decades of advocacy from fellow scientists, the history books are finally being rewritten. Franklin is no longer a footnote, but is rightfully recognized as a key architect of our understanding of DNA. Let's travel back further, to the American Old West of the 1870s. This was the era of legendary lawmen, but one of the greatest has been almost entirely forgotten. His name was Bass Reeves. Born into slavery, Reeves escaped during the Civil War and lived in Indian Territory, where he learned the land and several Native American languages. After emancipation, his unparalleled skills as a tracker and marksman made him the first black deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi River. For 32 years, Reeves was the most feared lawman in the territory. He was a master of disguise, a brilliant detective, and an expert with a rifle and pistol. He arrested over 3,000 dangerous felons, often bringing in large groups of outlaws single-handedly. He was a man of unwavering principle, a commitment so strong that he once had to arrest his own son for murder. Yet, as his legend grew, his story faded into obscurity, overshadowed by fictional white heroes. In fact, many historians believe that the character of the Lone Ranger was directly inspired by the real-life exploits of Bass Reeves. Today, through statues, books, and films, the true story of this legendary lawman is finally riding back into the light. Our next story takes us back to the world of science, to Columbia University in the 1950s. Dr. Chien-Shiung Wu was a Chinese-American physicist, already renowned for her work on the Manhattan Project. She was known as one of the world's leading experimental physicists, an expert in a field completely dominated by men. In 1956, two of her male colleagues, Tsung-Dao Lee and Chu-Ning Yang, proposed a radical theory that questioned a fundamental law of physics known as the conservation of parity. It was a fascinating idea, but it was just a theory. They needed someone to prove it. They turned to Wu, the only person with the skill and precision to design the incredibly difficult experiment required. Working tirelessly for months with her team, Wu cooled radioactive cobalt to near absolute zero and meticulously measured its decay. In early 1957, she had her answer. The results were clear. Parity was not conserved. She had overturned a core principle of physics. Later that year, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded for this groundbreaking discovery, but it was only given to Li and Yang, the theorists. Chien-Shiung Wu, the woman who performed the crucial experiment that proved their theory, was ignored by the Nobel Committee. Despite this monumental snub, she continued her brilliant career, earning the title, the First Lady of Physics. Today, the scientific community widely agrees that her exclusion was one of the Nobel's greatest injustices. Finally, we go to Montgomery, Alabama, on March 2nd, 1955. On a segregated city bus, a brave 15-year-old high school student named Claudette Colvin refused to give up her seat to a white passenger. She was defiant, shouting that it was her constitutional right. Police were called, and the young girl was forcibly dragged off the bus, handcuffed, and thrown in jail. This was 9 months before Rosa Parks made her famous stand on the very same bus system. Civil rights leaders were initially excited by Colvin's case, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to challenge segregation. But they soon learned that Claudette was young, unmarried, and pregnant. They worried that she would be seen as a respectable symbol for their movement, and made the painful decision to wait for a better plaintiff. That plaintiff became Rosa Parks, whose carefully planned arrest sparked the Montgomery bus boycott and made her an icon. Claudette's spontaneous act of courage was pushed to the side. But her story doesn't end there. She was one of the 4 key plaintiffs in the landmark federal court case, Browder v. Gale, that ultimately declared bus segregation unconstitutional. It was her testimony that helped win the legal battle, yet her name was forgotten by history. For decades, she lived in obscurity, her role erased. Only recently has Claudette Colvin begun to receive the recognition she deserves as a true pioneer of the civil rights movement. Henrietta Lacks, Rosalind Franklin, Bass Reeves, Chien-Shiung Wu, Claudette Colvin. These are just 5 of the countless hidden figures whose stories have been silenced. As we celebrate their long overdue recognition, it serves as a powerful reminder. History is not just what we are taught. It's also what has been left out. It's our job to keep asking questions, to keep searching the archives, and to keep fighting to fill in the blank pages, because there are still so many more heroes waiting to be discovered. Let's remember their names and share their stories. Thanks for watching.